Whenever I close my eyes, I see him laughing again, saying that I'll never be able to make it on my own, that I'll starve in the streets and come back begging him to take me back, that I can't do anything without him, and that's why I'll never really leave him, that I'll have to be guided and disciplined like a stray dog. He wasn't always like that. He was sweet before he started making more money than I do. Then the humiliation started. He told me to know my place, to quit my job because if I was going to make a puny salary, it was better that I only took care of the house and of him. He didn't hit me for the first 3 years of our relationship, and before the verbal abuse, there were no red flags that I could see. I spent over 6 months working odd jobs in secret so I'd have enough money to leave. It's not that I had a bad relationship with my parents, but I didn't consider relying on them because they had raised me to be independent. But I did, because not everyone has this privilege, and they died to have the opportunity that I had been choosing to miss. Because admitting you need help and accepting that you're worth of being helped takes some courage and grandeur too. So when he threw me out in the rain, holding all the last 4 years of my life in a small suitcase, I went to them. Mom and Dad were always good to me, but emotionally distant. They'd expressed their love in more subtle ways, I suppose. Still, they hugged me tightly for a long moment. Then Mom prepared my favorite comfort food, and, after I ate it, Dad grabbed some blankets and put me to sleep on the couch, as he kept watch the whole night, sitting on the armchair beside me with his gun next to him. None of it really matters now, but that's the story of how a 25-year-old freelance writer ended up affording to buy a small and old, but otherwise really nice farmhouse. I always fancied living alone in the countryside, somewhere peaceful but not too remote, where I could have my own chickens and work in silence, and still see my next-door neighbor in the distance, and only need to drive 5 minutes to my local farmer's market. My parents helped me finance this marvelous place. The floorboards creaked in some places, and all the doors needed a good oiling, but the house was solid. With an old-time charm it was hard to find these days, and it even came with a cow. The house was 3 hours away from where I used to live, with him. So I felt safer. I was ready to start again. Mom and Dad spent the whole next day helping me move and make small repairs. "Didn't the ad say the house came with 50 chickens? There's only 42, my mom informed. I couldn't help but laugh. It was very like her to count chickens when there were more pressing things to do. "They probably meant roughly 50, Dad replied. "But 42 is roughly 40, not roughly 50. "Or you could have just miscounted them, Mom. All chickens have pretty much the same face." When the night came, Dad got us some takeout for dinner in the nearby city. We ate between boxes and dusty furniture. "Will you two stay the night?" I asked, as we had our meal. The house had a master bedroom, a smaller bedroom that I planned on using as my home office, and a third one that needed a lot of work before someone can use it. They looked at each other, and I could almost see the engines working inside their brains. Staying meant that they would have a horrible night's sleep, as both were severely allergic to dust. But maybe I'd feel more protected and at peace. Not staying meant having some decent rest to drive back the next day, and maybe I'd feel independent and strong. But maybe not. "I think we'll just go to an inn in the city," Mom finally replied. I nodded. I was ready to spend my first night alone, and I was about to find out that I wasn't alone. I don't even know why I went into the attic that night. I was exhausted, and all I needed was to take a good shower and go to bed early. I guess I just wanted to take a good look all around my new place and feel satisfied that I had somewhere nice to live. My Orcus, finally! A very high-pitched voice scared me as I let myself in. Startled, I tried to grab something to defend myself. Whoa! Stop this shit, she added, and my silly weapon, a loose piece of wood, fell from my hand. I shone my flashlight in her direction and saw a magnificent, if extremely odd, female. Her crimson hair was styled like a 1920s diva, matching her brilliant vermilion dress, full of elaborate embroideries. Her light brown skin was gleaming, but covered in black scales on the shoulders. Her face was beautiful, but you could see a pair of fangs partially covering her pouty lips. Her eyes were weird and mesmerizing. She had feline pupils, 2 narrow slits almost lost in the immense pale pink of her irises, and long, thick eyelashes that made her the prettiest woman I had ever seen, despite the fangs, the stained shoulders, and, oh my god, the scaly, dragon-like, ragged wings. It took me a while to realize that her bare foot was like the hooves of a goat, and that her hairstyle almost covered 2 curled black horns. The tips of her fingers were black too, and covered in dried blood. I just watched her for a while, not knowing what to do. Her presence didn't feel menacing, just imposing. She then smiled and whined like a queen. Come on, feed me. I've only had 1 chicken today. Automatically, almost like I was under a spell, I went to the hen house to get her some food. When she finished eating, she introduced herself. My name doesn't matter. It's too dangerous to say it aloud anyway. But yours is Melinda, right? She asked. I nodded. Well, girlfriend, your house was cheap because it's haunted. But luckily for you, I'm the Empress here, so the lower ghosts won't disturb you as long as you follow my rules. Be smart, and you can have a happy life raising your calves or whatever. Are you ready to hear them? Don't only nod like a dumbass. Yes, I'm ready, I hurriedly replied. Rule number 1. You'll feed me 2 raw chickens every day. I don't care where they come from, but if you don't give them to me, I'll wreak havoc in your little farm and eat all your hens and any other animals you have. And then I'll be unwilling to be nice with you for a while, which means Flying Head Stew will visit your dreams. Right, I quivered, but I could live with that. Rule number 2. No people sleeping over. As the master of this house, you have some privileges, but not your guests. You can have visitors, but if they're here in the darkest hours of the night, I'm under no obligation to be nice to them. So I will draw little dicks on their foreheads in permanent marker, and grab their foot and their tongue to jolt them awake, maybe sit on their chest for a little sleep paralysis fun if I feel like it. And don't even get me started on what legless Linda will do to them. I laughed a little. Hearing about the other ghosts made me feel uneasy, but somehow I knew that I could believe her, that they'd leave me alone unless she said otherwise. So that was fine too. I didn't plan to have my parents or friends stay the night, and if I ever got another boyfriend or girlfriend, we'd just hang out at their place. So far, she sounded playful, relaxed even, but then her face became somber, and her seriousness was so eerie that made my knees tremble. For a fraction of a second, I considered that maybe he was right, and I couldn't do anything proper on my own. That I was putting myself into a situation far more horrid than the last abuse I went through. When she spoke again, she sounded like a whole different demon. Rule number 3. I never make noise, even when I roam around. The others are quiet too, except for the eventual pot falling in the cupboard in the middle of the night. So if you ever hear footsteps, it's not us. In that case, the only safe place is your bed. Cover your head and wait until I tell you it's okay to come out." Her pupils contracted even more. I might be a beautiful, ancient, and scary demon, but there are far greater dangers in this world than me. My first night in the house was quiet, except for the sound of water dripping in the sink. I got up to check it and decided to install a new tap in the morning. My parents came back around 10 a.m. to check on me one last time. Told me they were really proud and went back to their place. Mom remarked that now I only had 41 hens and that I absolutely should ask for some of my money back. I then saw them off and headed to the nearby grocery store. It was almost time to feed my demon tenant, and I didn't want to kill another of my poor chickens. As I was checking out, the old cashier/shop owner started a conversation. "Two raw chickens, huh? You must be the kid who bought old Lou's ranch." Speechless, I just agreed and nodded. Lou was the deceased father of the sellers, and they'd been eager to get rid of his haunted property. Did Lou tell this old man about her? "No need to worry or explain yourself, lass. Everyone knows that place is strange. Do as you see fit to protect yourself," he winked. "Also, if the raw chickens are back, I'll give you the same deal I had with Lou. It'll be too expensive not to buy them in bulk, right?" I hadn't considered that yet, but I immediately felt grateful for his thoughtfulness. "Don't buy them from anyone else, and you'll get a great price from me. You'll pay weekly for what you pay for 6 of them here, and I'll deliver them to you, frozen. Rest easy. Lou never had a problem doing whatever he was doing with thaw chicken," he smiled. Mr. C, as he introduced himself, was a very fatherly type, with a snow-white beard and gentle blue eyes, always partially covered by a worn-down beret. He seemed to be truly worried about a young woman living alone. Having him check on me every 7 days didn't exactly make me feel safer, but it was nice to know that someone cared. He even brought me some cookies made by his wife every now and then. My only recurrent visitor made sure to never enter the house. Every Sunday morning, Mr. C honked his delivery truck's horn 3 times and waited until I opened the automatic gate. Then, parked keeping a safe distance from the house, going exactly far enough to pet my goat Lilibeth. Then, I went upstairs to feed her the domicile lunch. My fellow demon mocked Mr. C for his fear, but then praised him a little for his wisdom. It's weird to say that, but I didn't think too much about Pandora. Since her real name was Forbidden, that's how I nicknamed her. She was a graceful housemate, so except for her meal times, when she was always incredibly snarky, I was completely unbothered by her presence. I was even happy that she was there, but it was kind of in the back of my mind. Humans are indefinitely adaptable. We can get used to virtually anything and don't give a second thought about it. For that reason, I can say that things went smoothly pretty much all the time. It was only after 2 months that I had the first incident involving Rule 3. I was washing dishes for breakfast in the kitchen, feeling carefree and even a little proud of myself. Earlier that day, I'd managed to milk my cow Marybelle for the first time, and drinking it fresh was great. I was humming a song when I felt my left ear go suddenly cold. Before I could even think about it, a voice whispered to it, "Melinda, sorry to bother you, but the master tells you to go and hide in your bed." This ghost sounded exaggeratedly goofy, like some Jim Carrey character. I started looking for a dishcloth to wash my hands. "No time for that, madam," a second voice announced next to my other ear. I felt my body lightly pressed towards my room. like 2 pairs of hands were trying to move something really heavy and just barely succeeding. I knew I was in trouble when I heard very slow but heavy footsteps coming from the living room, like a fucking giant had entered my house. "Go!" Voice number 1, the goofy one, urged me. As soon as I turned to go to my room, I caught a glimpse of something horrific reflected in the cupboard's glass. A huge, bluish and deformed face with evil lupine eyes. It opened its mouth like it was ready to devour my body, my soul, and everything else around. Like there was nothing but endless void and suffering inside this creature. "Close your eyes or it will be too late," voice number 2, who sounded like an old lady, warned me. "We'll guide you. Hurry!" Goofy voice instructed me, and I complied. Running to a specific destination with your eyes closed is harder than you think, especially when you're really scared and naturally clumsy. I stumbled on some furniture and heard a few things falling and crashing, but I didn't care. I wanted to follow rule number 3 at any cost, not only because I trusted Pandora and hated breaking other people's rules, but mostly because what little I saw from the beast was enough to know that it would give me a fate worse than death if I didn't. I lied in my bed, covered my head, and pretended not to exist, breathing as little as possible. "I hope our aid was satisfactory," the old lady said politely. "The master can't come and help you at these times because she has to prepare for the battle, so she sent us." I nodded, not daring to talk. You could hear horrible roars and the unmistakable sound of fighting, even through the decent muffling of my blanket. I twitched every time I heard the heavy, destructive movements. "What is that thing?" the goofy voice asked, astonished. "And don't worry, madam, the enemy can't hear us. We're pretty much talking telepathically." "Oh, you weren't here yet the last time he came," the old lady replied. "The master calls him the captain. He comes twice a year, hungry for souls. He almost got the former landlord when he got too old to run to the bed. The poor man barely left his room this time of year." I was too scared to even open my eyes, so I lost track of time, but I'm sure they spent at least 20 minutes fighting. I've never been so grateful for not having close neighbors. Imagine having to explain all that ruckus to other people. Then Pandora appeared in the threshold, holding a scimitar and all covered in a deep blue and sticky substance. "It's safe to leave, housemate," she announced in high spirits. "You should have seen me there. Never mind, it would get you killed horribly. Anyway, look how his stupid blood stinks." She put one of her armpits next to my face and laughed. It smelled of sulfur, of course, but the blue patches in her skin had an even worse smell, like a spoiled egg had a baby with a sewer. "It will take forever to clean it up with my powers, so I'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. Get me your best towels and I'll help myself to your tub." I obeyed, leaving the room to attend her request. I was pleasantly surprised to see that my house was intact. All their fighting took place immaterially, so nothing was damaged. I remember thinking that I'd get Pandora an extra meaty chicken for lunch, and that she was actually a good person. But I was being horribly naive.
Chronicler here. We here at Creepy Spaghet would like to thank Poloniumpoisoning for allowing us to tell their story. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to stay updated on these terrible tales, and make sure to check out the author in the links below. If you're interested in having your story narrated, be sure to reach out to our humble overseer, as he continues his journey to pull the darkest stories from the infinite depths of the internet. Until next time, fiends, and remember, we are darkness.